A couple summers back, I agreed to house sit for this older couple I had met at a professional retreat. They lived out in the East Bay of California and had planned a 2-week trip to Hawaii, but were hesitant to board their 2 cats. During one of our conversations, I'd mentioned how much I missed Northern California, so we worked out a deal. I'd watch their house and pets while they vacationed, and I'd get a free place to stay in one of my favorite parts of the country. It honestly seemed perfect. They were warm, generous people, and they even let me use one of their cars while they were gone. They spent a few days showing me around the property, giving me the rundown on the plants, the house, and the cats, one of which was incredibly shy and always hid in their room, which seemed like her little sanctuary. After I dropped them off at the airport, I was pretty excited to settle into the quiet and explore. I spent my mornings hiking up around Mount Diablo and my afternoons taking spontaneous road trips. Sonoma for wine and music, little beach towns near Santa Cruz, even lazy city strolls through San Francisco. I was so relaxed out there that I started looking up local rentals, half seriously wondering what it'd take to make a move out west. About halfway through the second week, I remember pulling into the driveway late one afternoon and getting this wave of hesitation before opening the door. I figured it was just exhaustion catching up to me, so I went inside, made a light dinner, and went to bed. That night, I found the shy cat curled under my bed, quietly whining to herself. I'd barely seen her up until then, and now she wouldn't leave my room. It struck me as odd, but I assumed she'd just finally gotten used to me. Or maybe she got startled by something outside. I did start locking the bedroom door after that, not because anything had happened, but just because I was starting to feel strangely unsettled. Around 2 or 3 a.m., I thought I heard crunching in the gravel outside my window, like someone walking slowly. But when I got up to check, there was nothing. I stayed up for a while just listening, but whatever it was didn't return. The next day, I had plans to go to a small festival in Sonoma, and despite feeling slightly off kilter, I went. I came back around dusk, only to find the front door locked with the deadbolt. My key only worked on the bottom knob lock, which was how the couple always left it. I hadn't touched the deadbolt at all. That had never happened before. I called the couple and asked if there was a backup key somewhere, and they told me where to find it, buried under a thick patch of ivy in the backyard. It had clearly been untouched for a while, so that reassured me a bit. I chalked it up to memory issues, or maybe them accidentally locking it before they left, even though that didn't really make sense. But then it happened again, this time with the door leading from the garage to the kitchen. I stepped out for a drink from the second fridge, and when I turned to go back in, the door had somehow locked behind me. I had my keys, but it still shook me up. I kept looking at the cats like maybe they'd somehow bumped a lever or something, but that explanation never sat right with me. That night, the same uneasiness came back even stronger. The shy cat was still glued to my bedroom, tucked behind the dresser with her ears flat and tail puffed up, staring toward the hallway like she expected something. I didn't sleep much. The following morning, I woke up feeling absolutely drained, nausea, chills, aching all over. I stayed in and laid on the couch most of the day, binging old shows with the sound low. As the day dragged on, this intense paranoia built up in the back of my mind, like I wasn't alone in the house. It was different from the night before. It was sharper. I couldn't shake it. By late afternoon, I decided to get out, even if just for a bit. At the grocery store, while checking out, the cashier gave me a cheerful, "Have a good night," and something about the way he said it made me break down. I didn't see it coming. I just started crying as I walked out of the store, because a part of me whispered that he might be the last person to say that to me. That's how sure I was that something terrible was going to happen. I sat in the car for a long time, just debating whether I should go back. I didn't want to leave the cats, but every part of my body was screaming not to open that front door. Eventually, I pulled myself together enough to at least go unlock it, hoping I'd feel better once I was inside. But I didn't. I stood frozen in the entryway, unable to walk any further into the house. That's when I did something that, looking back, sounds completely ridiculous. But it worked. I stood there, facing the dark hallway toward the bedrooms, and yelled out that I'd already called the police and they were on their way. I thought maybe, if someone was in there, they'd bolt before things got worse. Right after I said it, the light in the main bedroom flicked on, and I heard something heavy slam against the wall. I ran. I ran harder than I ever have in my life, straight back to the car, and called 911 while trying to breathe through the panic. The police showed up pretty fast and did a full sweep of the house. They didn't find anyone, but the sliding glass doors in the master bedroom were wide open. Behind the curtains, tucked in the corner, was a pile of empty food wrappers. Nothing had been stolen. No forced entry. The couple said everything was right where they'd left it, but whoever had been there had been living in that room for at least a couple of days. That room looked directly into the living room, which meant they probably watched me on the couch all day while I was too sick to move. After the police left, the shy cat immediately returned to that bedroom, like she knew it was hers again. I never saw her again for the remaining 3 days I stayed there. I didn't sleep much after that, but nothing else happened. Still, the damage was done. To this day, I can't go to bed in a new place without checking every closet and lock, but I'm grateful for whatever instinct kicked in that night. I'd rather carry a little fear than be another unsolved case. Back when I was 17, I agreed to watch 2 kids for a week while their parents were out of town for work. I'd looked after them before, so I knew the house, the routine, and even their dog's weird habit of staring at the wall for no reason. The house wasn't far from where I lived, maybe a 10-minute drive, and the area was mostly spread out homes with a lot of trees, quiet streets, and not much going on, especially at night. Their place was modern, kind of boxy, with a wall of glass windows on one side and this separate guest unit in the back that a guy rented from the family. They told me not to worry about him. He kept to himself and never came near the main house. It happened on Halloween weekend. Everyone I knew was out partying or at the haunted hayrides, and I was stuck passing out fruit snacks to exactly 2 trick-or-treaters before settling the kids down for the night. Just as I was about to start getting them ready for bed, the doorbell rang. I figured it had to be someone I knew, since trick-or-treating was basically dead out there. Turned out it was my best friend and a couple of guys from our friend group. They were heading to a nearby bonfire party and thought it'd be funny to stop by and remind me what I was missing. We talked in the kitchen for a bit, mostly about nothing, and after they left, I went around locking up and shutting all the blinds. I made some popcorn, turned on a horror movie, and was starting to unwind when I heard this really soft knock. At first, I thought I imagined it, but after turning off the TV, I heard it again, light, kind of timid. Then out of nowhere, it escalated. Someone started slamming on the door with serious force. I bolted upstairs, not even thinking, and grabbed the house phone in the master bedroom. I didn't have a cell at the time, so calling home was the only move I had. My mom picked up, and when I told her what was going on, she handed the phone to my dad. He told me to stay put and that he'd be there as soon as he could. While I waited, I peeked out of the room and saw the older kid standing in the hallway, looking pale and worried. I told her it was just my dad and sent her back to her room. Then I ran downstairs to check that everything was still locked. As I moved past that giant row of windows, the entire glass wall shook violently, like someone was pounding or throwing something at it. I froze, then dashed into the den and grabbed a heavy fireplace poker, heart racing. And just like that, everything went quiet. The pounding stopped, the air got still, and I stood there not knowing if I should cry or scream. Then came a single, slow press of the doorbell. I crept to the door, half convinced it was my dad, and looked outside. No one. just my porch light flickering slightly in the breeze. I slammed the door shut and went back to the phone. Called my mom again, whispering, "Did Dad just get here?" She said he was still looking for his keys. I completely lost it at that point. My mom stayed on the line, calming me down, and eventually said, "Okay, he's on his way now." A few minutes later, headlights cut through the trees and I ran to the door, ready to throw it open. But just before I did, 3 people stepped out from the shadows near the side of the house. My dad came charging out of his car with a bat in his hand, yelling like he was about to fight off a gang. And then, as they stepped into the porch light, I realized it was my friends, the same ones who had visited earlier. They had never gone to the bonfire. They thought it would be hilarious to sneak back and scare me, banging on the doors and windows to mess with me. My dad absolutely unloaded on them. I was furious and relieved at the same time. The rest of the night I barely slept, and those friends definitely stayed off my babysitting radar for a long while after that. One summer, when I was around 17, I had the house to myself for a weekend while my parents headed out to our beach place near Cape Ann. They usually didn't stress too much about leaving me alone. Small town, quiet neighborhood, and we had a couple of nosy neighbors who basically watched the street like it was their job. My mom left the fridge packed with leftovers and cash on the counter for takeout, and I'd already mapped out my weekend: pizza, video games, and absolutely zero responsibilities. That first night, I stayed up way too late gaming, so by the time I woke up the next afternoon, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I had plans to meet some friends at the local park to mess around with hockey sticks and an old tennis ball around 3, so I dragged myself into the shower around 1:30. Now, I'm not proud of it, but when I'm alone, I treat the shower like a second bedroom. I had music playing on my phone and was scrolling through random stuff, standing under the hot water for probably close to an hour. Somewhere in the middle of that scroll session, I heard the back door open. It's old and sticks a little, so it always makes this sharp groaning sound when you pull it. Impossible to mistake for anything else. I stood there for a few seconds, frozen, trying to make sense of what I heard. There weren't any voices, no footsteps, just that one sound. After a minute of silence, I chalked it up to wind or something stupid and turned the water off. Still wrapped in steam and confusion, I grabbed a towel and started walking downstairs. The way our stairs are set up, it's like this narrow little tunnel leading straight into the kitchen, so you can't see what's ahead until the last couple of steps. Every creak of the stairs sounded way louder than usual, and I found myself creeping down like I was in some thriller movie. I got near the bottom and paused for a second, giving myself a little mental shake. I figured if someone had come in, I'd have heard more by now. I took the last couple steps normally and turned the corner into the kitchen, completely not ready for what I saw. There, smack in the middle of the kitchen, was this man, just standing there, staring directly at me, not moving an inch. What freaked me out more than his face or that weird smile he had was the way he was holding his arms. They were lifted behind him in this almost twisted, unnatural way, like he dislocated his shoulders on purpose. The second I locked eyes with him, my brain just went blank. I didn't think. I didn't speak. I just lunged forward and swung at his face with the clumsiest punch I've ever thrown. The hit landed, but I didn't wait to see what he did next. I bolted back upstairs, nearly tripping on the towel as it fell off. I slammed my bedroom door and jammed a chair under the handle like I'd seen in movies. I grabbed the landline, hands shaking, and called 911 while trying not to completely lose it. I told the dispatcher what happened, voice cracking the whole time, and she told me to stay on the line and keep quiet. I crouched beside my bed, trying to hold the phone steady, when I noticed the hallway light shining under the door just disappeared. I didn't need to see feet to know he was standing right on the other side. I stopped breathing. The shadow under the door didn't move, just barely shifted like he was rocking back and forth. I couldn't even bring the phone to my mouth. I stayed like that for what felt like half a day, just listening to the dispatcher ask if I was still there, while that shadow stayed put, silent. Eventually, the light came back, and I heard the faint creaks of the floorboards as he moved away. I still didn't move. I sat there, stiff and silent, until I heard heavy knocks at the front door and voices shouting that they were with the police. When they came upstairs and I saw their uniforms, I broke down. My body felt like it had been clenching for hours and finally let go. Since then, my parents don't leave me alone overnight, even though I'm older now. I check every lock, every window, and double back just to be sure. The police were as helpful as they could be, brought in a sketch artist, did a lineup, but they never caught the guy. Sometimes, when it's dark and the neighborhood's quiet, I swear I can feel him nearby again. I picture that awful smile and those twisted arms and wonder if he's still out there somewhere, just waiting. Back when I was in middle school and my sister was in high school, we used to make extra cash dog sitting for this wealthy older couple my mom cleaned houses for. They were retired, childless, and lived in this massive place tucked into a quiet, heavily wooded neighborhood that felt a million miles from anywhere else. Their backyard looked like something out of a travel magazine. Stone walkways, a glistening pool with a little waterfall, and nothing but trees for days. The house itself was all stone and glass, very open concept with huge windows that let you see straight out to the backyard during the day, but at night, you just saw your own reflection staring back at you, which always made me a little uneasy walking around alone. They had 2 dogs, which were polar opposites, Samson, this gentle giant of a golden retriever, and Sadie, a husky mix with serious issues. Sadie was the kind of dog that would tear through furniture if you left her alone too long or lose her mind if a stranger got too close. Because of that, the couple paid us stupid good money to just hang around their place while they went out, basically to keep Sadie from wrecking the joint. Most of the time it was chill, TV, snacks, swimming, but Sadie could turn into a little monster out of nowhere, and we'd have to wait her out until she calmed down again. One time, she even backed me into a corner barking like crazy, and I had to stand on a couch just to feel like I had any control at all. The Easter weekend, when all this went down, started out pretty normal. My sister had the overnight shift, and I stayed with her the first night just so she wouldn't be in that big, weird house alone. We binged a bunch of terrible rom-coms, ate junk food, and passed out late. The next day, we swam in the pool for a while before I left to go home, since she said she'd be fine by herself that night. That ended up being one of the biggest dodged bullets of my life. That night, she was using their treadmill downstairs in this slick little home gym that looked out over the pool through one of those giant sliding doors. She was watching some Easter weekend movie marathon and zoning out when she thought she heard the house beep. Same noise the system makes when a door opens. She stopped the treadmill and walked over, and sure enough, the sliding door was open. That thing was massive, heavy as hell, and there was no way it could have budged on its own. The dogs hadn't moved from their spot, which was odd given how reactive Sadie usually was, but she chalked it up to the wind, or maybe she hadn't closed it all the way. Trying to shake it off, she locked the door again, restarted her run, and tried to focus on the movie. But after a few minutes, she couldn't ignore the feeling of being stared at, like something was right behind her, even when the room looked totally empty. She powered through her workout, but eventually gave up and decided to head to bed, locking herself into the guest room with both dogs and hoping that would help her relax. A couple hours later, she woke up to a low growl vibrating through the room. At first, she thought it was just Sadie doing her usual freak-out routine, but then Samson growled too, and he never did that. While she was trying to calm herself down and not completely spiral, She heard the unmistakable sound of the alarm chime again, another door opening. That's when she lost it. She grabbed her phone, called our dad bawling, and he told her to hang up and call the police while he drove straight over. When the dogs bolted out of the room barking like crazy, she knew it wasn't just in her head. She sprinted to the front door, let our dad in, and he did a quick sweep upstairs with his gun, but everything looked untouched. When the police arrived, they checked the perimeter and found that the sliding door was cracked open again and the backyard gate was unlocked. The lock on the sliding door had definitely been tampered with, but there wasn't any obvious sign of theft. No broken glass, no missing items, just that door, half closed, like someone slipped in and slipped out again without leaving a trace. That's when the cops casually mentioned something the homeowners had apparently told them earlier that month. Turns out, the husband had gotten a death threat related to his work, something about layoffs and people losing their jobs. They never told my sister about it, never warned her to be careful. After that night, neither of us ever agreed to dog sit there again. Within a few months, the couple had sold the house and moved out of state. Rumor was the husband lost his job, and we never saw them again. I was scrolling through this site called Stay Secure, kind of like a gig board for night security jobs, and came across this listing that made me do a double take. It offered $50,000 to monitor security cameras for just one night at a property in Seal Beach. Yeah, it sounded ridiculous. It read more like a prank than a real offer. But I'd been between jobs for over a month and figured there was no harm in at least reaching out. The listing said it was urgent, and surprisingly, I got a reply within an hour from someone named Mari. We agreed to meet the next day at a quiet little sushi spot not far from the harbor. Mari looked like someone straight out of a law firm, perfectly tailored suit, neat hair, and that kind of serious energy. She explained that the house wasn't currently occupied, and all I had to do was monitor the live feeds from the surveillance system. She said the place had a ton of sentimental value, and they just wanted someone watching it while they were away. Sounded simple enough. We swapped numbers, and I noticed hers was on a flip phone, which threw me off for a second, considering how sleek and high-tech the house looked in the listing. But I brushed it off. Maybe she was just one of those people trying to disconnect. Fast forward to the night of the gig. I showed up a little after 6 p.m., walked around the house, which honestly looked like it belonged in a home design magazine, and took a quick inventory of the camera placements. Mari had told me not to worry about the basement or the attic, said they were both cluttered and being used for storage. That didn't really strike me as odd at the time. If someone's paying me that much, I wasn't about to go poking around in places they told me to avoid. After the self-guided tour, I settled into the surveillance room upstairs, which had this big leather chair and an entire wall of monitors. The night was pretty uneventful. I watched a couple of screens, ordered some takeout, and stepped away just twice to use the bathroom. By around 11:30, I switched off the monitors and just slept there in the room. It was a long shift with a lot of nothing happening. Sometime in the middle of the night, I stirred awake for a moment. No noise, no lights, just this weird jolt that pulled me out of sleep. I didn't stay up long, just rolled over and knocked back out, not thinking anything of it. Morning came, and I did my usual routine, packed up my stuff, took a shower, and got dressed. I was ready to grab a coffee and a breakfast sandwich somewhere nearby when I walked past the basement door. That's when it hit me. There was this thick, sour smell coming from underneath the door, something heavy and bitter in the air, like something way past rotten. Then I saw it, a dark reddish streak on the floor just outside the door frame. I froze. My first instinct was to bolt, and that's exactly what I did. I ran out without even locking the door behind me. Once I was in my car, I called 911 and told them everything. What I saw, what I smelled, and where I had been working overnight. They took it seriously, said they were sending someone out. I stayed on the phone until the first squad car arrived, and then finally ended the call. About a week later, I got a call from the police. They asked me to come in for a follow-up. When I got there, I wasn't prepared for what they told me. Investigators had found 4 bodies in that house, 2 hidden in the attic, 2 in the basement. And Mari? She wasn't who she said she was. The house actually belonged to a couple who had been reported missing, and apparently, Mari was connected to them in some way, possibly a relative or someone tied to their finances. She had been posing as the owner to gain control of the property and inheritance. One of the victims had still been alive during my shift, and based on the blood trail, they had tried to crawl up the stairs for help before succumbing. That brief moment I woke up, that was probably when it happened. I can't even begin to describe how messed up that realization was. Mari still paid me the full amount, which made the whole thing even more disturbing. Looking back, the flip phone, her vague story, all of it seemed so obvious in hindsight. I was sitting across the table from a murderer and didn't even realize it. That night's changed how I look at people, and definitely how I choose jobs moving forward. I don't think I'll ever let myself walk blindly into something like that again. Back in early fall, I was staying over at my friend's property just outside of town while they were off on a trip to Belize. They asked me to keep an eye on their place and take care of their 2 big shepherds while they were gone. Nothing fancy, just basic house-sitting stuff, and they were kind enough to pay me for it, which was a huge help since I'm on disability. The house is out past the highway, tucked between hills and farmland, and the nearest neighbor is at least a 10-minute walk away. Local police response? Let's just say, if you're in trouble, you'd better be good at waiting. I'd stayed there a bunch of times before and it's always been peaceful, but something felt off this time around. I remember it was just after 8 p.m. when I hopped in the shower. The dogs were chilling in the living room when I went in, but halfway through, I suddenly heard both of them going crazy, growling and barking in a way that was not their usual noise. One of them has narcotics training and doesn't even react like that to deer or coyotes, so I immediately shut off the water and stepped out, still dripping, trying to listen. I didn't see anything when I checked the window, but the moment I stepped into the hallway, I saw this shape move past the bedroom window. Not fast, more like someone trying not to be noticed. The porch lights were on like always, so I know I wasn't imagining it. I quietly told the dogs to stay close and be quiet. Right then, I caught a low male voice outside. I couldn't make out much, but I clearly heard the words, "Come around." That chilled me. If someone's saying that, it means they're not alone. I grabbed my sidearm from the end table in the living room and positioned myself near the front entrance just in time to hear the doorknob start to rattle. I didn't hesitate. I yelled out loud and clear that I was armed and not afraid to defend myself. I could hear them take off running. I used voice command to call the county dispatcher, and thankfully, they had units close by that could be there in around 20 minutes. I told the dispatcher where I was, that I'd need to unlock a cattle gate at the end of the driveway for the officers, and that I would have my firearm on me while doing it. She reassured me they'd let the officers know, and even encouraged me to stay armed until help arrived. That part actually gave me a weird sense of calm. While I waited, I called my friends and let them know what happened. They have security cameras around the house that they can check through an app, so they started combing through the footage while I sat tight and waited for the flashing lights to appear down the gravel road. Once the deputies got there, I walked down and let them in, then stayed back while they searched around the property. They didn't find anyone, not even near the barn or the tree line. But right as they were wrapping up, my friends messaged me a screenshot from the camera. Sure enough, it showed a figure standing on the porch, just out of range for a clear look at his face. That footage matched up perfectly with what I'd seen and heard. The weirdest part was when the officers said they'd passed a guy riding a bicycle not far from the area when they were heading to the call, which is strange because hardly anyone bikes out here, especially not at night. They took down a full report, but there was never any follow-up. No arrest, no update. My husband didn't love the idea of me being alone after that, so he came out and stayed with me the rest of the week. Later, one of the neighbors mentioned he'd found a makeshift campsite deep in the woods a few weeks earlier. Maybe someone was living back there, maybe not. I've stayed at the house again since then, and it's been quiet. But I'll be back again over Christmas, and let's just say I'm not going to let my guard down this time. If you're wondering whether I would have actually pulled the trigger if someone broke in, yeah, I wouldn't have hesitated. It's a hard choice, but in that kind of moment, survival wins.